The blues is one of the most important and influential genres of music in modern music history. You can trace its influence through pretty much any genre of music from the early 20th century all the way through to today. Jazz, rock and roll, funk, soul, R&B, pop, you name it, the blues has influenced it. And because of this, being able to play a killer blues solo is pretty much a necessity for the modern musician. It pretty much lays the groundwork for soloing in any style. But it can be a little bit challenging to get it at first, so today we're going to go over a few simple tips and tricks to help you begin mastering the blues. The first and simplest thing is knowing which notes are going to sound great. And for the blues, this is quite easy because we can always fall back on the blues scale. In case you don't know, the blues scale is a minor pentatonic with an added flattened fifth. Or if you want to relate it back to the major scale, it would be the first, flat third, fourth, flat fifth, fifth, and flattened seventh. So in the key of D, we'd get D, F as the flat third, G, A flat as the flat five, A, and then C as the flattened seventh. Now there are of course a whole bunch of other notes which are still going to sound mega, some of which we will go through a little bit later, but you can play a mind-blowing solo just sticking to this one scale. Now blues songs typically have quite a simple structure. There's a 12-bar cycle which goes round and round, and the melody is split into 3 4-bar phrases. We have the first phrase, let's call it A, and then that phrase repeats, maybe with a slight change, and then we have a different phrase to finish off that cycle. So it goes A, B, kind of like question, question, answer. And this structure can be heard in blueses of all types. We've got The Thrill Is Gone by B.B. King, Robert Johnson's Sweet Home Chicago, Little Richard's Lucille, and even jazz blueses like Tenor Madness and Woodchopper's Ball still follow this same structure. I've put a link down in the description to a whole bunch of these in case you want to check those out after this video. Not now. After. But why am I going on about song structures when this video is about soloing? Well, we can use that same structure in our solos to sound pretty authentic. Play a simple phrase, repeat it, and then use a different phrase to end the 12 bars. Now, one of the most common mistakes people make here is overplaying. Keep your ideas simple, use plenty of space, and really focus on locking in with that rhythm section so everything you plays sound great rhythmically. Good time always trumps complicated notes. Now, any good solo is a little bit like a story. It takes us on a journey that makes sense, has a few surprises along the way, and of course has an exciting climax. And blues soloing is no exception. In fact, we can use those last 4 bars, that B phrase, as our climactic point. But what if we're doing a longer solo? Well, we can use this same structure each time we go round that 12-bar cycle, just with different A and B phrases. A bit like it's a new chapter in our story. Honestly, this is just a simple framework, and of course you can be a bit freer with it, especially as your solo goes on. No, not that sort of free. But using this structure, your solos are always going to sound pretty hip. But if you do want to level up your blues soloing a little bit, we can move away from the blues scale and start incorporating some of the harmony a little bit more. Harmonically, the blues is usually pretty simple. It only uses 3 different dominant chords, chords 1, 4, and 5 of whichever key you're in. So if you're in the key of D, it would use D7, G7, and A7. And we have 4 bars of chord 1, 2 bars of chord 4, 2 more of chord 1, and then 1 bar of chord 5, 1 bar of chord 4, and finishing off with 2 more bars of chord 1. And that makes it sound way more tricky than it actually is. And the blues scale doesn't actually have a lot of chord tones in it. Fine, it's got the roots and the 7th of each chord, but it doesn't have any of the thirds, and it doesn't have all the fifths. So when you're improvising your A phrase, try to incorporate some of those chord tones. And then when you repeat the phrase, change some of the notes to match the chord tones that are in that 4 chord. So again, in the key of D, any F sharps you had in your A phrase, you could move those down to F naturals, because that's the 7th in our G chord. And any Cs, the 7th of the D chord, you can lower to Bs, because that's the 3rd in our G chord. And then on the B phrase, because the chords are moving quite quickly, try basing it entirely around chord tones rather than the blues scale. And by using the blues scale, this simple structure, and a few chord tones, we can end up with a pretty mega solo. And if you want some ideas on how we can develop our simple ideas into something a bit more complex, check out this video next.